Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Michigan. My name is Scott Morgan Roth, appropriately named the Motor City Madmouth. And I just came off an excellent sports exchange when I had the opportunity to spend some time talking with Homestead Miami Speedway President Al Garcia. I want to thank Mr. Garcia for his time as we end up getting ready for the Dixie Vodka 400 race weekend down at Homestead Speedway. With that said, the second half of our doubleheader, let me talk about introduce the crew real quick. Mr. Kneecap Biting, Jeremy B. Welcome back. At least we know who he's rooting for. Yeah, I mean, my eyes haven't failed me, right? Smoking?
No, they haven't failed you at all.
Good. Well, they may fail me somewhat of the place, but at least I'm not colorblind. I can see what you're wearing. And Madman Mancini, okay, welcome back to the big show. Welcome back to Michigan. I know I've had you on Florida and other spots around here,
Yeah,
but glad to have you back.
I appreciate it, man. I'm looking at Jeremy and I'm trying to figure out, is the Macho Man come back and where's Elizabeth?
Well, it's Mancini's first crack at talking to Jeremy B. He's certainly one of my better people as well. And last but not least, George Icorn, the guy I've only known forever. George, welcome back.
Good to be back on, guys. Good to see you, and let's have a great show tonight.
We'll do that. Let me just give you an overview of the topics. I'm going to give George an opportunity to roll in his book in a moment. We're going to talk about the Detroit Lions gap for not getting Bailey Zapp. Red Wings started off 2-0, and Michigan Wolverines hammering Penn State 41-17. Before I do that, though, folks, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and advertise. Call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a hard time getting to our website to find the YouTube channel, just go to youtube.com, search for South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button. That's all she wrote. With that said, I can also be reached at Tribune South on Twitter. All right. Well, you know what? I'm going to lead off with Jeremy on this one. Okay. And let's talk about the Lions gaff not getting Bailey Zapp. I know that Dan Campbell coached him in the Senior Bowl. Jerry, man, you had a pretty interesting take on this earlier when you brought it up. Why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, with the way that Brad Holmes likes to hit on his late round picks, we didn't have a fourth round pick this season. And the Patriots picked him up in the fourth round. So without that fourth rounder and not trading up to get him, it made it so it was impossible for the Lions to take him. They wanted him to fall. I'm quite sure that's who they'd have taken offensively over James Mitchell if he fell to the fifth round.
All right, but Dan Campbell coached him at the Senior Bowl.
I understand that.
Don't you think, though, Jeremy, if he really wanted him bad enough, he probably could have drafted him in the third round if he really thought that he was that good of a talent? Because here's my point. I think this guy's going to ultimately be the best quarterback in the 2022 draft class.
I think the best quarterback never got a shot, but that's just me. I have a guy that I liked even better than him, but that's another story. I think the best one was Eric Barriere out of Eastern Washington University.
Okay.
But because of his athleticism, plus he had a great QB mind. The only time he struggled was under pressure. You put him behind that Detroit O-line that hasn't allowed but 4 sacks in 6 games?
Right.
He might be doing pretty good there. That being said, he was a day 3 pick. Right. Bailey Zappi was considered a day 3 pick from the time of the combine, after the Senior Bowl, everything, which means you don't take him before the 4th round.
So you don't think that Brad Holmes could have found a way to...
I didn't say he couldn't have found a way to move up into the 4th round. They didn't want to because they didn't want to do the same thing as last year. They moved up to get Derek Barnes, and so far that's looked like a flop pick.
Right. No, I'm with you. So I figure, what about future draft capital later on down the road? You don't think there was ever a possibility?
They've already did all that to get Brockers and Trinity Benson here, and both of those trades have been, well, crap.
Okay, well, that's okay. I mean, the word you used is not against FCC regulations.
Yeah, that's why I kept it as clean as I could.
Yeah, I know. But I can tell you right now that if Zappi does what I think he's going to do, he's going to make all of us look bad because New England doesn't have an offensive coordinator. Zappi will find a way to make these guys relevant. They're currently 3-3. You put a 300 spot over Cleveland. We all know about the Lions game, which we're not going to recap again. Okay, but the reality is that somehow, some way, he's going to make Belichick look better than he is at the rate he's currently progressing. We're not going to get into a future quarterback controversy between Mac Jones and Zappy. Too premature. So you're telling me, Jeremy, you don't think there was any way the Lions could give up future draft capital to get Zappy this year? Is what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right, George, you've heard what Jeremy had to say. Give me your take.
Well, I think they were set on Goff coming back. Their sights were not on a new quarterback right now in this draft. I agree with Jeremy. I mean, their plans were made and who they were going to draft, where they were going with their picks, the linebacker and the 2 picks in the first round, even though the one guy was hurt, the receiver. I don't think that the Lions were going to pick a quarterback unless, like he explained, he fell to the 4th round or later.
Fifth round.
Now, I know what you're saying, Scott. If you really wanted the guy and you coach the guy, then get the damn guy.
Right.
No, I know what you're saying, Scott, because I'm sort of like you, because I wanted them to take a quarterback in this draft. I know they didn't really want to. This wasn't the draft. They were going to get one. There wasn't a whole lot of talent at that position, as we know, going in. But this kid has really got some tools. He is really showing right now that he deserves to play in the NFL. And like you guys said, he's going to be a shining star. There's no question about it in my mind. And you got a great guy there with Belichick, obviously, as head coach. I don't know about that crazy Matt Patricia coaching, but he
Matt Patricia, say it right.
Yeah. He doesn't coach him day by day, obviously. They have a quarterbacks coach, I hope, there in New England. But yeah, they could come back and haunt them. It could come back, but I mean, Scott, you're right. They were looking at the kid. They were training with the kid. They coached the kid at the Senior Bowl, and yet they didn't take him.
Well, I saw the kid play at Western Kentucky in Conference USA against FAU. I mean, this guy lit up everybody he played against. And I was getting media releases from their communications department. We're not getting a whole lot now because we've been focusing more in Florida, not out-of-market stuff as much as we have in the past. But nonetheless, I got enough media releases every single week for the year that we were connected with Western Kentucky. And everything I saw was Zap. I ended up putting it on my Twitter account and forwarded it to everybody that would bother to look at it. So I knew that they were getting a stud there. I knew that anybody that would end up with Bailey Zappi, okay, to me, would get themselves a stud. And it only figures the New England Patriots would do it. And then the Lions would be on the wrong end of a 29-0 loss because of a guy that I knew had stud written all over him in the NFL. All right, Mancini. Okay, we'll zap you with some information if you see if you can give me some zappy good comments.
Well, I'll tell you, when I look at the draft of quarterbacks, the one that comes to mind, and probably the best draft I ever saw, was 1983. Okay. That's when you had a slew of guys coming out, and we're not going to see that again until next year. We see teams pick up quarterbacks that play at Dakota State and stuff like this, and they're 15-minute car chases, and everybody grasp on them. But let's face it, we haven't seen that star quarterback. If it's not coming out in the number 1 pick, and Jeremy brings up an interesting point. Look at Dak Prescott. He was late in the draft too. I think he was 12 or 13. So,
well, no, I think he was the 4th round pick out of Mississippi State, so he did come a little bit later.
Well, yeah, but
pick, Mark, what he was.
You know where I'm going with it. He wasn't, the clear-cut number 1 choice there. Right. And I think these quarterbacks, if you're not getting a slew of quarterbacks coming out, which can turn your program around, right, then you might as well draft late in the 2nd, 3rd rounds to get somebody, because you saw what's happened in Atlanta or San Francisco when they got Trey Lance, when they should have got Kyle Pitts there and really solidified themselves. So
yeah,
that's the big key here when you're looking at teams that jump and what's that old saying? He who jumps first loses. Well, that year the 49ers jumped first and they lost.
Good points, Mark. And the one thing I really strongly emphasize is when a coaching staff has an opportunity to coach at the Senior Bowl, and I mean the Senior Bowl, you get an opportunity to interview this guy. He's playing for you. You know what he can do. And to be able to coach at the Senior Bowl, to me, is is unbelievable. It's priceless. And
Yeah.
I think that's where the Lions erred. I mean, now I'll tell you right now, Mark, to your point, and you are right. I'll tell you right. First round quarterbacks don't always make it. In fact, if they flop and bust, you said
68% bust rate.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Right. And you know what, Jeremy, to expand on your point, okay, to me, what you have is it sets your franchise back 5 years. So you might as well go out there and hit on between 2 and 7.
So
at least the risk.
I know you talk about Bailey Zappi. I want to give you the totals on that guy that I'm talking about out of East Ewu, Eric Barriere. His total for 4 years as a starter, he's been starting since his redshirt freshman year. 13,670 yards passing, 120 touchdowns, only 28 interceptions. He also added 21 rushing touchdowns in that time too, in those 4 years that he started. He rushed for a total of 1,537 yards with 358 attempts with a 4.3 yard per carry average.
Is that a Division II school?
Yes, it is. Ewu.
Yeah.
It's out of the Big Sky division out there. And
that's what I thought. Yeah.
Isn't that the school that has a red turf too, if I remember right?
Yep, they have the red turf with the Red Eagles.
Yeah, and I've heard of him. So where's he at now? Who's he with?
He actually went to New Orleans, and New Orleans decided to cut him for some reason. It's probably because of all that money Taysom Hill has wrapped up there.
Yeah.
So he ended up going to the Michigan Panthers after they cut Shea Patterson. We all knew he wasn't going to work because he was garbage at Michigan. That being said, he came in at the end of the season when Paxton Lynch got hurt in a game. Damn near got him back in that game, played the last game, and won it for him.
Interesting. See with an
Panthers?
NFL. Is he with an NFL team now?
No, he was a free agent. He was just signed to get him through the end of the year.
I got you. Yeah.
But I'm just saying that's a free agent. He could be a UDFA that they could pick up to kick Tim Boyle down the road.
Well, amazingly enough, with all these quarterback injuries, you never know. You could probably see this guy, and I'm not going to get into that.
Well, and not only that, what ends up happening, guys, is we saw Carson Wentz come out of a school that he ran roughshod over, and I like Carson Wentz. He's just not getting the protection there. But when you look at Trey Lance, and I knew this guy wasn't a quarterback right from the get-go, but the 49ers put a lot of stock in this guy, and what did he do? He was at a no-name type of a school that, sometimes if you're not battle-tested, that you will get tested in the pros.
Oh, yeah. You bet. You sure will.
But one of the things that I liked was he had 3 games where he put up those numbers like you see in Madden, because his senior year, he threw for 5,047 yards.
Jeez.
Yeah, I think the Trey Lance.
He had 46 touchdowns and 4 interceptions.
The Trey Lance pick to me was a little. I understand why they did it. They wanted to
there was a big discussion about that, and I got into it with a California show on that because he said, well, that was a Kyle Shanahan pick. I said, no, it wasn't, because if it was a Kyle Shanahan pick, Kyle Shanahan would have said, get me Jimmy G out of here. He wanted Mac Jones. John Lynch wanted Trey Lance because he was the flashy new player and the new style that can run.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's looking for those dual threat quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah. So,
but you talk about late round quarterbacks, and Mr. Scott is wearing the hat of
Tom Brady,
blue, and the GOAT. Let's talk about you want the greatest.
Pick 199 that year.
Yeah. Look at all the teams that passed on the GOAT.
Remember Mel Kiper? When Tom Brady finally got to meet him like 5 years later, Mel Kiper says, this guy has a noodle arm. He's short, can't see over the offensive line, won't read a defense in the NFL. He won't amount to nothing. That's why he's a late round pick who Bill Belichick might be able to develop to be a career backup.
Oh.
Never know.
Remember that?
Yeah. Where's Rob Lytle when you need him?
Yeah, Yeah, there you go. Yeah, stood up, man. See, I don't want to feel ISIS came into the show. Okay, pal. That's okay. You can that a boy. All right. Anyways, let's go on to the Detroit Red Wings. We talked about the LA Kings taking on the Red Wings tonight. I do have a final score, by the way. It is 5-4. Kings win it in overtime. Red Wings are now, I think, 2-0-1. 5 out of a possible 6 points. Tyler Bertuzzi is out 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body injury. So
Isn't that 2-0-1-1 because they had one that finished as a tie, and then now they have an overtime loss, right?
No, no, the other 2 wins were clean wins. They were not in overtime.
Yeah,
No, I know.
Montreal
I mean, they had
Jersey.
2 clean wins. They have 0 actual losses, and then they already had a tie or an overtime loss already.
They
No,
got
they
rid
only
of
played
the
3.
Yeah, I think it might be 2001.
yeah, I know, whatever.
Whatever.
Let's not play around with the insanity of the National Hockey League of what they're looking to try.
Well,
to
I'll go first, Scott, if you don't mind on this one.
get 5 out of a possible 6 points for the 3 games isn't too bad.
Yeah. And the town is excited, Scott and guys. They are excited because the new head coach from Tampa Bay, I mean, everybody's hoping that Eisman plucked the great guy here, Lalonde, and this guy has the pedigree, man. He's been a head coach before. He was with the 2-time Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. He's got a system. He wants them to follow the system. This game obviously got way out of hand tonight. I mean, they should not give up 5 goals. That being said, they still, got a point out of it, as you mentioned, Scott, losing 5-4 to the LA Kings at home. The Bertuzzi thing is just another one of those anguishing things that happen in Detroit sports. How many times have we lost somebody early on in the season? All of our teams, Pistons, Red Wings, Lions, Tigers, and here we go again. I don't know what happened. He got hit in the hand by a puck. Well, you got a big, thick glove you're wearing, but I don't know. I don't remember the play in New Jersey that Bertuzzi got hurt. But yeah, he's out 4 to 6 weeks. That's a big blow to the Red Wings offense.
Well, talk about the enthusiasm there. I know now.
Yeah. Okay, I will. Okay, they rolled out the red carpet. I mean, that's a cliche. Teams do that. But the fans showed up at the Chevy Plaza outside Little Caesars Arena last week for the opening night. Everybody was excited. The place was sold out. Then they went to that was against Montreal. And then they went to New Jersey. Not an easy place to win and beat the Devils. And, of course, I wasn't there tonight. I'm sure they had another good crowd, if not a sellout tonight. But, yeah, I think you're right. The fans are happy. The media seem to be giving them the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, they face a huge challenge in that Eastern Conference, making the playoffs. But, yeah, I think the enthusiasm, the new players, the youngsters, plus the people that Eisman picked up, everybody's excited about.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Red Wings were aggressive in free agency. And when you're willing to spend some money in free agency with this organization, there are lots of times where players don't want to go to a market, in other sports. But when it comes to hockey, everybody wants to go to Detroit. But that said, I'm going to turn over to Jeremy. Give me your early impressions of the Red Wings.
I think it's great that we finally have a coach that knows X's and O's. That is what Jeff Blashill fell off of that on his face. He could develop players, make them look good, but he couldn't get them to play as a team because he didn't know how to run a team. And that is one of the reasons why I checked out on the Red Wings. And I see they're doing good, and I'm like going, man, I got to start paying attention again because now it looks like we got somebody that knows what they're doing behind the bench.
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
The big key here is that free agent Perron you brought in. I've always liked his style of play. And you're right, George and Jeremy bring up some interesting points. The Wings, they're going to be a surprise this year. They might make the playoffs. The East is very, very tough, guys. It's not like the West where it's pretty much wide open where, you might have 3 teams in the West and, you got a slew of others that can sneak in there. This is a dogfight, man. Philly's got Tortorella there. He's bringing that Broad Street mentality back into Philly.
Right.
You got the Penguins that are still loaded with 3 of those guys, Malkin, Crosby, and Letang that have been there 17 years. The Caps are still there. Montreal is trying to find themselves. The Rangers, the Islanders. I mean, it just goes on and on. I mean, and we're
Penguins.
not even talking Tampa and Florida in this thing
Boston.
yet. Yeah. This is going to get really interesting as far as the fact that I think Detroit, progress over regress. That's all you can ask for. You're not going to get there overnight. If they make strides, but I think they're going in the right direction, and they're going to be a team that I think they're about 2 years out. I really do. I think that they're built. It's not going to happen like I said overnight, but they're about 2 years out. Get some developing cogs in there. Start tweaking it a little. They're going to be back to Hockey Town.
Yeah, they've got some good young prospect systems. There's only one person I want to mention. We'll go into our final topic of the night. The addition of assistant coach Bob Buffner. And this guy here used to be with the Windsor Spitfires, and he had a decent run with the Florida Panthers, not so much out in San Jose. San Jose was on the wrong end of the rebuilding side, so they let him go. But here's a guy, Bob, who spent a lot of years with the Windsor Spitfires, so it's almost kind of like a homecoming for Bob. And I hear he's a tough, hard-nosed coach. And for a guy like Derek Lalone, who's a first-year head coach, I don't think he could have picked a better assistant than Bob. George, you know anything about Bob?
No, I haven't had a chance to meet him yet, Scott, but I've heard great things about him. And the assistant coaches, I'm glad that they allowed Lalonde to go and pick who he wanted. Some of the guys had been with Blashill for quite a number of years, and I'm glad that they let him pick his coaches. And I'm telling you that it's a new game in town, so to speak. And he comes highly rated, as you said, Jeremy. They couldn't have picked a better guy to fit this new look of the Red Wings.
Go ahead, Mark.
And not only that, in some ways, I bet you the Red Wings probably figured they should still be in the West right now. It'd probably be a little easier path to get to the playoffs. And then you can have Colorado back in this equation as a rivalry. But they made the move over there, and now you gotta play with the big boys.
Mark, you always come up with a great comment at night. And I used to joke around with Ken Holland over at the BB&T Center about going east. He said, "Yeah, it's better to go there." But let's not kid ourselves. When the Red Wings were in the Western Conference, they had their private jet, and they had a lot better. So, Mark, when I find a sponsor, we'll call the comment of the night, and that was definitely it, Mark. You were
I'm pretty sure the reason they wanted to go into the East because they wanted that rivalry with Toronto.
There were a lot of original sixes that they wanted. The main thing is the travel was important.
The travel. The fans did not want to watch those games at 10, 11 o'clock at night. Okay, and that steady diet of West Coast games got tired fast.
It'll take a whole lot more than Toronto, Mark, to change conferences. And once upon a time, Toronto was in the West until they found a way to get back to the Eastern Conference. And then Detroit had Columbus in the Western Conference. And your short trips included, by the way, a time zone change to Nashville, St. Louis,
Dallas.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because if the National Hockey League decides to go back, let's say in Quebec City or something, and kind of restructure this, somebody's going to have to leave the East. And who would be leaving the East? Geographically,
Mark, they're not getting a team in Quebec City. Sorry for all those people in Quebec that hated me the first time when I off the wall thing.
The Nordiques,
which I won't get into because this could get viral and I could get shot. And the only difference between the time I posted that one thing is I wasn't married. Now I am, so I kind of have to be around.
Nobody thought they'd get another franchise in Winnipeg again either.
Here, you know what? I'll mention this anyways. I have no choice, and I know that George and I will always remember that when the Montreal Canadian fans booed the national anthem, I wrote the Montreal Morons, and I got more death threats than politicians had lies. So, but I won't harp on that tonight because I don't want my beautiful wife Candy to be a widow, because life would be a whole lot more boring with me out there. But the reality of the situation is, Quebec fans, you're not getting a team anyways. I don't think the NHL wants a team in Canada because of the dollar. And of course, the pandemic probably didn't help either with travel across. They need bigger markets. And I think the most logical bigger market could ultimately come in to play now.
You know what, Scott? Why you petition to get it back in Hartford?
Don't kid yourself. That really was not a bad market. I don't think
it wasn't.
No, it really wasn't a bad market, Mark.
There's too many teams out in that area, though.
Right, there are. I think the most likely possibility for a team will probably end up being Houston. I think that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, that might be an entry. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll just get away from that
another day.
But I want to stick with the Bob Buffner hire. He was an excellent hire for the Red Wings, and as long as the Red Wings have great assistant coaches to go along with Lalone, this team is headed in the right direction in the Eastern Conference. They'll eventually get there. But I can tell you right now, okay, and that's this. The Red Wings still get more national appearances and some teams in other markets, including the one I'm in Southern Florida.
They
So
sure do, Scott. That's a very good point, Scott, because you look at the schedule this year for ESPN/ABC and, of course, TBS/TNT, and there's a lot of Red Wing games slated. You're right, and that's coming off of a team that was pretty still pathetic last year because they know Hockey Town is Hockey Town.
Yeah, but the reality situation, George, is the Red Wings in their original six. In fact, they've won 11 Stanley Cups, the most by any American team. We'll take them when they're down because they draw. And the Red Wings saved the National Hockey League when they needed it on NBC, and prior to that, to Fox. When the Red Wings are relevant, the NHL is better because of it. Anytime you have an original 16 that's relevant, it's one thing. Anytime you have an original 16 that's won 11 titles, that's another story. So
True.
Well, hey guys, as you segue in pretty much out of hockey real fast.
Sure.
One of the good goalies that I always saw growing up, and I liked him tremendous. I'm surprised he's not a goaltending coach somewhere, is Mike Liut.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder, but
But
I you know what, Mark?
St. Louis.
Me, I'm gonna leave it alone. I don't know enough about it, but there's a lot of good goaltending coaches that probably could be what they are, but they're not. So, all right, we're going to the final topic of the night. Is if you didn't figure it out, I'm wearing a Michigan Wolverines hat. Why? Well, number one, I love the Wolverines anyhow. Penn State, Saturday, 41-17. Donovan Edwards, 16 carries, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns. Blake Corum, who now, as I understand, is emerging as a Heisman Trophy candidate, 28 carries, $166, 2 TDs. They were inspired by the fact that Mike Hart got back on the field after a seizure. Michigan total rushing yards, 418 rushing, 563 total. I know that Penn State went into this game as one of the better rushing defenses on the planet. It may not be nice to fool Mother Nature, but you didn't fool the Wolverines fans either because the Wolverines ran amok against the Lions, the Nittany Lions. All right, George, give me your take on that.
Well, they did better than any of the prognosticators. They beat the spread by leaps and bounds. They played a pretty complete game. I know they had the pick 6, but it wasn't his fault. It wasn't JJ's fault. That pass was deflected. He had no chance on that one. So I'm not hanging that on him at all. Good field goal kicking. They probably got the best field goal kicker in the nation. That'll be a very important person to watch as they get down near the end and against good teams like Illinois. And again, they have to play Ohio State, of course, and Michigan State. So all in all, I think things are progressing well. I think there's these two running backs are unbelievable. And Blake Corum, I said early in the year, he should be considered among the watch of the Heisman hopefuls. So I'm not going to back down at that. But this kid, JJ, has done a great job at quarterback. And I think things are clicking well. But again, cautiously optimistic, knowing that at the very end, it's going to come down to Buckeyes and Michigan. And there's a possibility looking ahead that obviously 2 Big Ten teams could make the Final Four, the semifinals.
Well, here's what makes the Michigan situation very interesting. Jim Harbaugh interviewed for the Minnesota Vikings job, and he's just lucky.
Oh, yeah.
Wolverines brought him back. And the guy that I spoke to at the University of Miami, Josh Gaddis, was a person in line to get that job. And then he came down here to my neck of the woods, which worked out for me. I had a chance to talk to Josh, one of the nice guys on the planet. He'll ultimately be a head coach anyways. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
So Harbaugh's fortunate that they brought him back. And then he had that big year that they renegotiated his contract and everything was much better. But that could have been a rough ending for Jim Harbaugh. With that said, before I turn it over to Jeremy, their early schedule of Colorado State, Hawaii, and Connecticut, there was just criticism way they schedule those opponents. And I understand the national media and everybody coming down hard when you have 3 patsies like that. But what they've done in recent weeks in the Big Ten schedule, and now the impressive win over Penn State really kind of sets the table for Ohio State after they blow out Michigan State. And yes, I believe they will blow out Michigan State and don't care. So with that said, George, was there anything you wanted to say before I?
No. I agree with you. I don't think the Michigan State game should be a contest. But being you put it a good way. I'm anxious to see what the other guys have to say.
Okay, well, go ahead, Jeremy. I'm going to turn over to you. Then we got Madman Mancini absorbing all this so he can come up with
Has
something.
there been a more overrated rush defense or a top 10 team who played nobody other than Michigan ever? Because they didn't have exactly the hardest schedule before Michigan either. The only person in the Big Ten they played that was of value, and they don't really rush the ball, is Purdue. Oh, I'm sorry, Purdue. They played Ohio, Miami, Ohio, not Ohio State, not Ohio University, whatever. They played Miami, Ohio. So
Well, they did play Notre Dame though, but that's
Notre Dame don't run the ball well either.
I know.
I mean,
See,
that's why they
Mancini-
lost the other night.
Jeremy, you got to understand, Mancini's seeing your Jeremy-isms for the first time. He never heard Patricia before. Now we got Perdon't. So it's amazing that, the more you come out with Madman Mancini, he'll still never figure out your Jeremy-isms, because I still kind of wonder about him myself. So don't feel too bad, Mark. This guy brings out a new Jeremy.
Well, he does, and he brings up interest, but that's about to change here in another year or so when USC and UCLA come into this conference.
Right.
Yeah, they can't run two teams at home in the same week.
Right.
One team's going to have to be on the road for a couple of weeks, and then it'll switch. They're going to have to do that way, and that's going to hurt everybody travel-wise.
Well,
in the long run.
First of all, and Scott knows me and George knows me that I'm not a proponent of paying $300 to see a powerhouse steamroll a bottom feeder. Some people like that. Maybe the point spread is 60 and they can win it at 65. I'm just not. Now, if you're not going to give me that, we've talked about this before, guys, then you start building super conferences so I can sit here and watch. And that Michigan-Penn State was a good game. I like it. They kept it going in the first half. Penn State tried to roll the table here. They wanted to be like the Phillies, Flyers, and Eagles all in the same weekend. Things don't come in fours; they come in threes.
Right.
And they
Mark. But the thing you have to understand, and you make a couple of valid points here real well, and I know this because of my dealings with the Florida Atlantic University Owls, and I work with Coach Schnellenberger, who's like Howard Schnellenberger, who's like a father figure to me. Whether they like it or not, they're going to schedule 2 or 3 of these anyways, these guaranteed games. These teams are going to take them because that's what funds their athletic departments, Mark. It really does. And I'll give you a quick second here. So I understand where you're coming from. You make a whole lot of sense, Mark. No two ways about it. But when you work at a mid-major like I've dealt with the last several years, then you understand that, hey, that $1.5 million, $2 million to get your tail kicked finances my entire athletic department, and they're trying to get the games. And they're good for the ones hosting it unless they get upset, and that's another story, because there are games that you can tune up and get some things worked out. So I understand, Mark, totally where you're coming from, but I see it from both sides. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and not only that, Jeremy and George bring up some great points too, but here's the problem. If you're not going to get tested and you're going to run roughshod and you're going to be 8-9-0 and you're going to get a number 2 seed, and then you get in the big game and you get your asses handed to you and everybody goes, what happened? Well, the thing that happened was you were never battle tested. You got to become battle tested to come out of this thing.
The Big Ten is a battle tested conference. Come on, Mancini.
Yeah, we have about. Let's get it right.
I'm not.
We only got about 6 great teams in the Big Ten. The rest of them are bottom feeders.
Right. The bottom feeders are the Colorado States that are coming in, or the
No. I'm talking about even in our division. Even our division, we got 6 tough teams, and then there's 6 teams that you don't know which team you're going to get each week.
I will give you that, Jeremy, this season, but typically that's not the case in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's having a bad year. Iowa's having a so-so year. Purdue is having a bad year. Minnesota, what? I don't know where they did. They
caught on
between their legs. I'll grant you that, Jeremy, this year, but usually the Big Ten is a little bit better than that.
I mean, you're good teams in the Big Ten every year, and it's tried and true. Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, Ohio State, and Penn State. That's the 6.
What happened to Illinois in Wisconsin?
Wisconsin has been wishy-washy for years.
Well, over time.
1 year they're good, the next year they're crap. 1 year they're good, the next year they're crap. This is their crap year.
Co-host Candy Ebling will never agree with your statement, Jeremy.
Well, that's true. Let me point this out, though. Illinois will be relevant because Brett Bielema is a new coach. And Nebraska, when they went from the Big 12 to the Big 10, oh, my God, now they really had to face tough competition. I remember
now they're falling apart.
Yeah, they've been terrible, Nebraska.
Well, because here's the deal. You don't have many athletes in Nebraska anyways. You produce offensive linemen and maybe a running back here and there, and they don't produce quarterbacks. Hold on, Mark, okay? Okay, I appreciate your.
We're going to get a fatal four-way going here.
Oh, no, that's okay. I love the dialogue. You guys are great together. I find myself with a very unique, fun foursome tonight, and I'm glad it's that all four of them. But here's the deal. Nebraska used to play Oklahoma many years ago around November when those games mattered, okay?
And national TV.
Right, all the time. Then Texas came in. All of a sudden, Oklahoma, Texas, that left Nebraska on the outside looking in. Nebraska comes to the big money grab in the Big Ten, and all of a sudden they haven't been relevant since they've been in the conference. So, I mean, the Wisconsin Badgers, to me, treat the Nebraska Cornhuskers, to me, like a whipping boy in a pinata, just like I do with you, Mancini. Every time you're out of line, I like to have you as my crazy brother in my pinata too. But at least you handle it better than Nebraska does against Wisconsin. But no, all kidding aside, and I mean really all kidding aside. This time,
who's quarterbacking for Wisconsin? Bucky? Bucky mascot? Quarterbacking?
Hey, don't you talk about my cat Bucky in a negative way.
Here's the thing.
That'll get you in my
Jeremy brings up an interesting point. The last time I saw the fight in the Illini, they came out here to the Rose Bowl. I think it was somewhere in the 90s. To play in the Rose Bowl game. So it's been, this is another one that's kind of fallen off the radar. And the problem with Wisconsin is once Barry Alvarez left, that was the end of that program for quite a while.
Well, you know what? There's now you're on to something a little bit. Once Barry Alvarez left as athletic director, to me, and of course he came from Notre Dame initially to Wisconsin, and we know he's honored right and left out in West. Now you're out of my doghouse, Mancini, because there's one thing you don't do on my network. Don't you ever insult my cat, Bucky.
What is Illini and Indiana known more for? Football or basketball? I'll wait.
Basketball.
Right.
Don't trust quarterbacks from a basketball school. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Nebraska hasn't been relevant here in the Big Ten since they've been here. Scott Frost wanted
and they're also a better basketball school.
And Rutgers isn't relevant either, but they wanted it because they wanted to grab the New York money.
Well,
they wanted the Big Ten money because the New York money wasn't there for them because they're a small market school in New York.
Wanted the money, but Rutgers wanted the Big Ten.
But then you got Maryland, you plucked them from the ACC because you got Washington State. I don't want to take this thing out of context.
Okay? Yeah, no.
Because it would be easy to go a lot of different ways. But
and I'm going to say something good about Maryland. What? I think they got the better Tunga Viola as a quarterback.
Well, we'll see.
He's hurt too, though.
Well,
I don't care, but he hasn't been hurt his whole career.
Right.
I mean, Tua's been hurt ever since the day he stepped on the field.
True.
Well, okay. Well, we'll see how that comes out. Mancini, my advice to you is if you don't want to piss off Candy Ebling, don't insult Bucky the Badger. That's a one-way. She'll hose you, man.
Yeah.
You can handle a lot of things, but she ain't gonna tolerate that, buddy.
Somewhere around this place of mine, a buddy of mine sent me out a Bucky the Badger blanket, so I got it somewhere around here. But I gotta probably wrap myself around it when it gets a little cooler in the California winter. But I will tell you this: talking about Nebraska, boy, they've really fallen off the radar, man. And where is Jarvis Redwine when you need him, and Tom Osborne?
Well, they didn't appreciate. Here's the thing, Mark. Well, no kidding aside here, pal. They didn't appreciate Bo Pelini, and they didn't appreciate Frank Solich, and they haven't been relevant since. So I'm going to leave it at that. Nebraska has not been relevant in a long time. When Scott Frost tried to pull that stunt where the Big Ten was shutting down, he wanted to play somewhere else. That was a bad move. And the Big Ten said, "You want to leave? Don't let the door." And nothing came of that. So, we'll talk about the Big Ten. The only thing I'll say about it is when USC and UCLA start traveling to these places in the wintertime, and they're not in the palm trees of Southern California. They're going to come down to earth just like Nebraska did. You take that to the bank. But
well, let me throw some fire on that. Get this thing accelerated. I'll throw some more gasoline on that. I think when you looked at Nebraska, they weren't prepared to play in this conference. They just took the money grab there. That's the problem.
No question about it, Mark. Yeah, no, you're right. They didn't know what they were getting in. The problem that they have to realize when you're going into the Big Ten is they're a lot bigger than the Big 12.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, where has Nebraska put that big ton of money into? Their facilities, because their facilities were decrepit and falling behind. That's why their football team started to look worse and worse. They put it into equipment. They put it into equipment rooms. They put it into the locker rooms, and they also put it into their stadium. Now that they got all that done, they can start focusing on recruits to try and bring them in. Right. I think they'll be good, but they're about 5 years away from having the fruits of that labor happen because they had to fix their facilities first.
But that infrastructure had to be fixed, though. You're right.
Yeah, but if you're going to say that, UCLA broke too. Why the hell do you think they made the move over to the Big Ten? Because number one,
UCLA's broke because they can't beat the big brother USC. They're moving with them because they know they'll get a bigger share of money to fix their stuff.
Years and years, UCLA.
But Jeremy, you know why UCLA is broke? Okay. Because the pandemic crippled their athletic program, and
it crippled a lot of athletic programs.
I know, but more so out in LA, Jeremy. I know it. We all know the pandemic didn't do any sport any good. They all lost.
Here, let me lay it down for some of you guys. The only thing I hook up out here, but besides the beautiful women and the weather, now I'm looking around if my wife's walking around here doing this show, but. I will tell you, USC and UCLA got riverboat gamblers there. Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly. You look at Chip Kelly. You know what? He's no player development. That team has been progress every year he's got there. Not the conservative Bob Toledo and Donahue and all these other guys and Durrell. He's got that team playing some good football. And you drop him into the Big Ten along with Lincoln Riley, who just got ripped off by the referees this past weekend. You're going to get some coaches going at it, and this is not Nebraska, Jeremy. This is going to be two teams that are going to come in here, and I don't care if it's in the snow or whatever. They got speed out here, and they can play.
Well, and to continue with your point, Mark. Okay, we all know that Chip Kelly had a nice run up at Oregon, so he landed in a conference he's all too familiar with. He knows the style of play. So I'm glad we had a pretty good spirit today. Let's get back to the Wolverines, though, okay? I know we went in a couple different directions, but everybody brought something here to the table that I thought was outstanding. So I want to make sure Mark, Jeremy, George, all your opinions were okay. But let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines, okay? And that's this. Jeremy, how far can the Wolverines go?
They may be making a run to another playoff appearance, but they have to not take Michigan State lightly like they've done the last 2 years. They can't go in there thinking, oh, we're going to walk over Little Brother. And I'll give you a little history on Little Brother. It's been Little Brother ever since the two schools were created because Michigan was first as an agricultural college in 1818, I believe it was. And then 13 years later came Michigan State. The nicknames they were given originally was Michigan was Caltech and Michigan State was the other college. Later on, they became Little Brother once the rivalry started in football in the Paul Bunyan Trophy because Michigan won it 20 years straight.
Pretty good stuff. All right, George, how far can
I didn't know all that history. Thank you for educating us, Smoke and Jeremy. All I can say is that I agree with you. Watch out. Because in the years where one team is real hot, we all know in this rivalry, the other one can come and snap you at your knees. Michigan better be ready. All that being said, of course they can make it to the playoffs. But again, it's going to be tough. They never win down in Buckeye Land. They never win in
That needs to change. I'm sorry. That needs to change.
I agree. It does have to change. Is this the year it changes, though?
It could.
Because he's got a great cast of characters there in Ann Arbor. I think it is the year he can reverse that losing streak at Columbus. That being said, their eyes are set on the college football playoffs, of course.
All right, Mark.
I think Michigan. I'm high on Harbaugh. I love Harbaugh. I like the style he brings to Michigan, And, he got that thing off his back last year, beating Ohio State. I think when you look at this shake, I think they're going to be in the top 4. I think it's going to be, Georgia will be hanging around. Alabama's going to figure out how to get in there. You got Michigan, and I'm going to still stick with USC, even though they got one loss. They're sitting at like 11, I think, or whatever. I think they'll get back in this thing. That was their toughest game Saturday. They run the table. They do something. You're going to have 4 schools go at it, but I'm high on Michigan. I'm not high on Clemson or Ohio State. That's hype to me.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm not too high on Alabama either because Texas nearly beat them.
And Tennessee did.
Yeah, and Texas A&M nearly pretty close with them.
Very close losses. Victories.
I do believe the Wolverines can get back to the college football playoff, but they need to make sure that they handle their business on the back of it and schedule, especially down in Columbus. So with that said, great broadcast by all you guys. I really thought the opinions were just unbelievable tonight. So, to me, I just love getting different opinions, especially with you, Mark, being on the other side of the country, being able to bring the USC, UCLA perspective. And, of course, everybody's going to pick on Nebraska anyways. Before I turn it over to you guys, though, we'll put it out there one more time. Subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com. And to advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're unable to reach the YouTube channel through our website, then please go out there and go to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button, and you'll be able to get all these shows as well as the videos as well. We also have an email address, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And finally, you can find me on Twitter @TribuneSouth. That's right next to my name here on your monitor. With that said, okay, we're going to go around the horn. Jeremy, why don't you let everybody know how they get a hold of you?
Well, as it says there for my name, Kneecap Biting with Smoking Jeremy B is my podcast on YouTube about the Lions. I also have my Motor City Kneecap Biters page, and I also am a writer underneath the South Florida Tribune. Go to the little 3-line heading to bring up the menu, see Motor City Tribune, and I am on the list of authors for him.
Nice job. I enjoy your perspective. All right, Mark, what are you laughing at? It's your turn to go out there. And
I thought he was doing the show with Dan Campbell, man. I didn't know that when he came in with the knee bite, and I thought he's got to be doing the show with Dan Campball.
You know what?
Look at my logo.
Yeah. There we go.
XM 203, Series 217, Liberty Bell Smack, WWDB AM 860. Finished the second year with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and now I'm picking up other cities, and I'm just so blessed to be a part of this big one. Nice to see George and meet Kneecap Biting, Smoking Jeremy there, and you, brother, doing the Saturday. And somewhere Camille's got she's going to play Halloween Ends, and I better get that Bucky blanket out to protect me.
Yeah, I would too. Don't mess with Bucky the Badger. And Mark, just remember that we don't need ISIS here every time your chair drops and that we can only see your neck. Otherwise, I don't want to feel like we're promoting terrorism, even though some of our opinions here might be a little more terrorism than you imagine. All right, George, last but not least, my right hand.
Oh, yes. I'm the author of Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, the book that you can get from Arcadia Press, featuring the likes of Ernie Harwell, Van Patrick, Bud Lynch, Bruce Martin, and Scott Morganroth. And with 2 of my favorites of all time, you're featured, Scott, with Jimmy Connors and with Muhammad Ali, doing some great interviews. And the book is available at the Motor City Tribune. At the end of my columns, there's a link to that. And I'm a writer along with Jeremy for South Florida Tribune and Motor City tab. And also I write for the Detroit Monitor. You can reach me on Twitter at SNG Sports 99.
All right. Well, we had a great doubleheader tonight. Once again, I want to thank Al Garcia, the president of the Homestead Miami Speedway, for joining me on the Sports Exchange tonight. And of course, we followed up with Fire Up Michigan. And I think what was so fun about this show is when Jeremy and Mancini get on the same show together. Boy, there's a different kind of energy between you. Not sure exactly what it is, but I think it's still fun nonetheless. Okay. And George, all I can tell you, pal, is I know what to expect out of you, so I'm not saying a whole lot more than that. So
okay.
So remember this, GMs, if you're watching around the NFL, do not draft quarterbacks from basketball schools.
There you go. And I do want to point out one other thing before we go off air, is I do enjoy doing the Saturday Sports Talk with Mark Mancini and Bruce Kessinger. I look forward to doing that every week. It's just one of those shows that we can just sit there, talk about some of the top topics of the day. And that audience that Mark, you and I and Bruce have,
Wow.
to me, they are absolutely great. They come in lots of big numbers, but some of the questions and comments that they bring on that show to me are just very, very deeply intelligent, and it's very refreshing. And I look forward to doing it every Saturday. So meanwhile, this concludes this edition of Fire Up Michigan. On behalf of Kneecap Biting Jeremy, Madman Mancini, AK ISIS. Now make sure you got a
ISIS.
Okay. And George Highcorn. And yes, Mark, cover that eye up a little bit more, because that way we have the Gomer smile being held backwards. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Michigan, and look for another Fire Up show next week. Take care, everybody. Have a great night, let alone have a great week. Bye-bye now.